Struggling to figure out who your ideal client is? Here's a simple place to start. Think about the 2 or 3 students you absolutely love working with right now. On this episode of Rock School Proprietor Podcast, I'm talking with Sara Campbell about how to use your existing relationships to transform your marketing. Sara shows us why the language you already use in lessons is way more powerful than any marketing jargon, and how leaning into what makes your best clients tick can help you attract more people just like them. There's no need to create some fictional ideal client persona or mimic what you see from other music schools on social media. This is about recognizing what's already working in your studio. Stay tuned. Just a quick heads up to our listeners that I'll be speaking at the NAMM show in Anaheim, California on Saturday, January 24th. My session's called Reimagining Private Music Lessons for Today's Learners, and if you're going to be there, I would love to see you. And even if you can't make the session, but you're heading to NAMM, shoot me an email at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. I'd love to connect while we're at the show. Welcome to Rock School Proprietor Podcast. My name is John Kazicki. And joining me today is the founder of Savvy Music Studio, where she helps music school owners with business strategy and marketing. And she's also the owner of Sara's Music Studio, where she teaches voice and piano. Sara Campbell. Hey, how are you today?
I'm great, John. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. In particular, because I have been following you on socials for, I don't know, like a while. And every time I see you have like shorter posts and then you have longer posts. And when I get into those longer posts and I read them, I think, man, that there's something like very authentic about those posts that you share. And it's also very effective because I feel like your personality really comes through in those longer posts. It's no wonder that you help music school owners and instructors with their marketing, because that stuff is great. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. In particular, you'd shared a post on Facebook a few months back about marketing giving music school owners or instructors the ick, as you say.
Yes, the ick. That was that was a fun rant.
Well, I loved it. But first, I guess we'll dig deeper into what that means, the ick, right? But it feels, the short version is that marketing and promoting yourself, I think sometimes feels maybe gross and inauthentic. Why do you think music school owners and instructors have such a hard time when it comes to marketing?
Gosh, there's so many layers to this. I think for many people, marketing feels very performative. And because of that, they feel like they have to put on this persona, or they have to be like a certain level of professional. And so there's that aspect. I think also, it depends on your background, but many people feel uncomfortable with marketing because it's essentially tooting your own horn. And depending on how you were raised, that is something you were told not to do. So that can feel icky too. And then I guess, you read it in my post, but there's just a lot of crappy advice out there about marketing. And a lot of it does not translate well into a service-based industry, which is what we are. And so when people try to take that advice, much of which is really like old school, outdated stuff that doesn't work anymore, when they try to take that and bring it into our industry, it feels gross. Like some of the things that people learn to do, it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel, it feels like it has to be loud and trendy and polarizing, and that it just doesn't feel good to market in that way.
Well, yeah, and when I read that post, that's when I initially reached out to you and I said, let's talk about this. I would love to talk about this on the podcast, because my take on it, and obviously expand on this if you'd like, but my take on it is that most music school owners went to school for music, and that's what they know. And they don't know about marketing. And so as a result, what they have to do is they have to learn. They have to learn quickly. So what do? Well, if you're going to market on social media, you're inundated with other people trying to sell you things. And like it or not, your algorithm has already been established for you to give you certain things. And what we see on social media is very polarizing. You use that term, and it's exactly designed to be that way. So we see a lot of divisive things and tactics from people trying to sell us things. And so if you don't know, you just assume like, okay, I guess that's what I have to do, because social media is designed that way. And cutting through that is difficult. But I think to shine a positive light on this, while yes, that's what we see mostly on social media, is the divisiveness and the polarization, because we're offering a service, the people who want to use our service really want authenticity. They really don't want that polarization. So I think it serves us to try and figure out, well, how do we be authentic and reach those people and kind of reject those tactics that we see on social media.
That's so true. And, I think one of the things that gets music teachers kind of into trouble with marketing too is that we automatically equate marketing with social media. And like that's our
Yes.
first thing that we think about. And so then we start thinking, oh, we have to behave like influencers. We have to,
Right.
do that kind of style of marketing. And that can feel like pretending. And the second that marketing feels like pretending, your brain tends to go into like rejection mode. And you just don't want to do it because it feels awkward and weird and salesy and kind of gross. So I think one of the things that I like to tell people is, social media is just one tool in your toolbox, when it comes to putting together marketing strategy. And I often will, when people come to me, they'll say, I need help with my social media for my marketing. And I said, well, let's look at all your other marketing first. Let's examine what's going on and, figure out, do you know who you're talking to? Do you know what you're selling? Do you know how to, speak to the people that you want to attract? And, let's take it off of social media for a second and look at some of your other marketing channels and see what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think getting into that idea of the different marketing channels, I can definitely see where all this stuff gets messy, right? And I've actually mentioned this on previous episodes, but I think it's worth mentioning in context here. Marketing's like this huge umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, you've got your brand and your strategy, and then you've got tactics like social media, right? Facebook's different than Instagram. Instagram's different than TikTok, and email's different than all of them. And if you're going to do direct mail, that's another tactic, and you might have to, switch things up. So when you sort of look at all those channels, things start to get really messy. How do I deliver my message? But you have to have that message first. You have to understand, like, well, what is it that's kind of at the top of the umbrella? So that way everything sort of flows down into those different channels.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where people get stuck. They don't have their messaging in place and they don't really understand what they're saying and who they're saying it to. And if you don't understand that, it doesn't matter what tactic you choose, whether you just named a whole bunch of them, if it doesn't matter which one you choose if you can't be really clear about what you want to say and who you want to say it to.
Right. So what would you say we talked really generally about those icky social media posts, right? What would you say are a few that as service providers, we should maybe avoid?
Okay, this is a good question. I think social media kind of trains us to think that results are going to be quick. It trains us to expect quick wins, viral moments, these extreme examples of things that people post.
Which
And
can work if you're selling a product.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. It can be great for selling products, but the way people buy services is not the same way that people buy products.
Right.
I think especially with music, depending on, because there's so many different types of music lessons out there, there's going to be a different, length of, the sales process, and, buyers are going to come in differently. So, what are the things that we should kind of avoid? What are the things that feel icky? I think it's when we try to market like people who are selling products and we rely on things like false scarcity. So,
Yeah.
for example, saying things like, oh, we only have 2 spots left, when that's not the truth. That's going to feel awkward coming out of your mouth, and it's going to feel awkward when you write it. So I think false scarcity is one of those things. And I also think that leaning too far into pain points. So just to define that, really digging into what is it that people are struggling with, and this applies more to people, I think, who teach adults. Not so much, a 6-year-old who wants to explore piano lessons does not have a pain point. Their
Right.
parents might have some pain points about
Yes.
getting, it's a struggle to get them to practice, or,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to fit things into a schedule. But I think leaning too far into pain points can feel kind of disingenuous. And, those things, doing the viral stuff, doing the, the stuff that we think is going to bring us quick wins, they often don't work,
Mm-hmm.
and they can come across as desperate. And they're not really communicating anything that clients really want to see.
Right.
They really, learning an instrument or learning how to sing is something that can be deeply personal to people. And
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be a really solid level of trust for someone to go, okay, well, this is the person that I trust with my voice. This is the
Mm-hmm.
person that I trust with, the injury that I sustained, learning how to play piano in college. And now I'm scared to go back to playing. There
Yeah.
has to be a level of trust involved. And that's what we really need to be focused on.
That's great. Yeah. But that's exactly where it gets tricky, right? Because how do you get people to trust you? Well, people trust you when you are your authentic self, right? People don't trust you when you kind of lie a little bit or create those like you mentioned, fake scarcity or fear tactics, right? So the trust is going to come from us being our true selves. And authenticity is a big one with me. That really is part of what attracted me to the social media posts that I see that you put out there. It's that real personality, like your real voice coming through. So what then, conversely, is obviously that's what makes good marketing. But how would you say a studio owner start to find their true voice or their authentic self so that they can start to present that in their marketing rather than these really base level things like, okay, here's a for instance. I saw just this morning, I saw a Facebook post in a community Facebook group. I'm a music teacher, voice, piano, DM me. That was it. And I think, okay, if I were to analyze that, that's like really like, yes, it's bare bones. This is what they're offering. I would expect that the clients that type of post attracts might be the clients who aren't really interested in finding out a little bit more about that person. And as a result, the retention might not be so great with those types of students, right? So how would you say we start to find how to craft our marketing so that it feels more genuine?
Mm. And it's so interesting. So that post that you mentioned, it's not,
Yeah.
they weren't wrong.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They were saying exactly what they did. But what was really missing there is, well, what is their approach? Who do they specialize in? And that sort of thing. I think that teachers struggle with that because we are afraid to say that we don't know everything. And that we can't work with everyone.
Yeah.
There is this kind of expectation, and I think that it's born out of like the school system, talking about the university, especially if you've been in a music education degree, that we are expected to teach anyone and everyone. And I get the message that, yes, everyone should have access to music. Everyone can study music. Anyone can learn how to play. Anyone can learn how to sing. But that doesn't mean that you have to teach everyone. And a lot of teachers kind of skip over, well, who do I really love working with? What are my specialties? And we try to stretch ourselves into fitting the needs of anyone who comes our way. And what you said about that type of marketing attracting the people who aren't really interested in learning more about like, how do you specialize in things? They're kind of shopping for products. They're looking at music lessons as a product and not as something that's in most cases, pretty highly personalized service. And so how do we get into, putting ourselves out there that way? It requires a level of vulnerability in admitting these are the things that I specialize in. And this is the way that I teach, and understanding that when you do that, you are niching down. Yeah. And that makes people so uncomfortable because it makes them feel like they're saying no to some of the people who might be out there. And that's this like scarcity thing that comes in our brains that tells us, well, if I specialize, if I really talk about the people that I love to teach, the people that I really excel at helping, that I am going to kind of narrow down my pool to a point where I don't have anybody who's coming to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this opens up another can of worms, but it runs parallel to what you just said. The majority of parents shopping for music lessons, they also don't really understand what they're looking for until they start to dig into it. They think music lessons, oh, let me call the closest place.
Right.
Let me call this place down the street and see. And then after they do that, then they think, I want to find a time that works in my schedule. And then they think maybe price could come into play. And after a parent who doesn't think about all those things goes through all those steps, they may have already made their decision, never even considering what's going to be the best fit for my kid. So I think that is important for us to start putting out there so that our audience starts to consider that. Our audience considers things other than things like, and location and schedule and price are important, right? But let's get them to think about these other things first. Like, people have called me asking for violin lessons. We don't teach violin lessons, Sorry, I can make a recommendation for someone else. I think it's important for us to start putting that stuff out there so that they do consider it.
Yeah, they're buying more. So I'll back up and say a lot of parents, especially if they didn't take music lessons, they just don't know what's involved with the process. Yeah. They don't understand that their kid is going to be learning so much more than how to read notes or how to make a sound, how to play a song. Right. They're learning really valuable life skills. And that's something that a lot of teachers kind of leave out of the process. For example, when you have an 8-year-old that is taking voice lessons, and I know right now there are going to be some voice teachers out there that are going, 8 years old is too young to sing. Right? I'm not going to wade into that argument. Look up full voice music, and Nikki Loney will teach you that it's possible. But, And when an 8-year-old takes voice lessons and they are learning how to sing, they're learning how to read music, it's not just that they're learning. They're learning so many valuable skills about the fact that their voice is valuable, that they deserve to be heard. They're learning listening skills and how to communicate with people one-on-one. They're learning how to interpret poetry. I mean, there's so many skills that we are teaching, and that is something that so many of us leave out of our marketing. And so many parents would love to hear that. I know that one of the big things many people talk about is that music lessons really can increase confidence. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds trite, but it is one of the biggest benefits of learning an instrument or learning how to sing, is that we become more confident as human beings, and we can, do things a little bit differently than we did before. That's the kind of stuff that parents really want to hear. That's the kind of stuff that adults want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, now, guitar has often come under fire because we don't necessarily teach you how to read music, in the traditional sense.
Right.
Right. Yes, in the beginning stages, many guitar instructors will teach, beginning note reading, but then it gets really complex. And there's a very specific track for someone who wants to be able to read music while playing guitar.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of people who want to learn how to play guitar actually don't want to take that track, right? So the first time I realized, because I would, in my early days of running a studio, I would get the phone calls from parents, and they would say something like, "Oh, well, they're going to learn how to read music, right?" And then I would try and figure out how am I going to answer this question so that I give them a yes answer, right? And that convinces them to come to the studio. One of the first times I decided to just sort of say, you know what, they might not, and have to try and convince a parent that it might not be that important for your kid, and challenge their belief that that is important, because for whatever assumption that, oh, well, music, you read music, so if I'm taking music lessons, I got to make sure my kid is reading music. It's not like school. It's not like everywhere you go in life, you see musical notation, right? Like the English language. So the first time I came up against that and decided, I'm going to challenge this parent, it just felt so freeing to then lean into the conversation and say, well, why does your kid want to play the guitar? Why do you want your kid to play the guitar? And ultimately get to that point and that realization, well, maybe that reading is not quite as important now. We can revisit it maybe in the future, but right now, I don't think that's that important.
That's wonderful truth telling. And I that had to be a pivotal moment, to think about how it changed the way you talk to parents.
Yeah, huge for me. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is kind of where marketing needs to go, right? It's about telling the truth about what do you teach? Who is it that thrives with you? Because I know that if you're listening right now, you can probably think of the types of clients who tend to thrive in your studio versus the types of clients who don't.
Bingo.
Right?
Yes.
And that's where we want to think about, well, what is it that helps them thrive there? So what is the truth about how we teach? The people that thrive in our studios, talk about the pace of learning, be truthful about it, tell people what they can expect. That's when people start to trust you. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I've said this a lot on the podcast, and I'll say it again, and I say this to music instructors all the time. If you are having a hard time figuring out who the right client is for you, if you are having a hard time, as you put it, trying to figure out how to niche down, right? Yeah. And find who you are as an instructor or what your voice is as a studio, just think about who those 2 or 3 clients and parents that you have in your studio already that you absolutely love and you have the best conversations with and you have the best relationships with. That's it. there you go. Whatever you talk about with those people, those are the things that are important to them. However those interactions work, you've done your marketing research just by existing in your studio.
We forget that too. We forget that we have the people that are already showing us, like, these are your perfect fit clients. These are your ideal clients, as they say in the marketing world, Right. And if we can learn to lean into that and start using language that we already use, like, say the stuff that you say in lessons, that's going to be more authentic and memorable than any kind of like marketing jargon you're going to learn out there.
Yeah.
We need to stop aiming for sounding polished and professional and start aiming for being clear about what we actually do.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. What are the things? I'm looking at my questions now because we totally deviated from where I thought we were going to go with this conversation, because I definitely wanted to go into like what makes good marketing, right? That shies away from that. And I think that's going to vary, obviously, based on like studio owner to studio owner or instructor to instructor, right? So, but we've kind of clarified like why things feel gross and why things feel icky. So now when we lean into the good marketing, what might be some tips that you would offer beyond what we just said in starting to really clarify our messages? I mean, do you have any suggestions or techniques?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you said already, but I'm going to add on to it. So pay attention to like the words that students and parents say to you. That's really important. So pay attention when people are saying, "Oh my gosh, I loved this lesson," or "I'm so proud of what, little Timmy is doing." Pursue those stories, ask what's going on, get those conversations going. That's marketing gold right there. Things like that. Get mindful about capturing real stories and real progress.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who's listening right now, y'all are fabulous teachers. Can we just capture that and put it in a bottle and show people what it looks like? I know that it can feel tricky because I talk about this with people all the time. It can feel tricky to have a part of your brain that's going, "Oh, how could I use this like lesson that I'm having right now? Like what inside of this lesson could I share with other people? Like what marketing materials could I get? Could I take a photo? Could I do a video?" Because you're so focused on the teaching because you're a fabulous teacher. But try to train a little part of your brain every week to capture some moments. Build it into the actual lesson itself as a part of celebrating what your students are doing. So I know it doesn't always feel natural to grab a phone because that's where our cameras live, right, during a lesson. But document the moments, even if they're small. We don't have to just celebrate when a student gets an award or when they play at a recital. What about all those small moments that happen on a day-to-day basis when something finally clicks and a student goes, "Oh!" Or they come into a lesson super jazzed because they learned how to play this intro on a song on their own. Capture those moments. A student plays a game and they win. It's those small moments of learning that we want to document. And we don't think of them as like major marketing points, but that's what people want to see. They want to see real stories. They want to see real progress, even if it's small, because that feels very compelling. It feels very grounded. People want to know what it looks like to actually work with you, not some super polished version. So become a documenter. Get your phone out, take pictures every week, take small videos every week, ask your students questions. Like, this is my favorite thing. At the end of a lesson, ask your student the question, "What was the most valuable thing here for you today?" Now, if you have a younger student, you might need to rephrase it with, "What was the most fun part of your lesson today?" The answers are probably going to shock you.
Yes. Yeah, because you're expecting, as a music instructor, right, we're predisposed to think they're going to mention something about the playing or what they learned or the musical content. And it's not going to be that.
It's not, that's not going to be the thing that they take with them. It's going to be that random conversation that you had about the fact that Rachmaninoff's hands were weirdly large. That's what, that's the stuff that they're going to remember. And those are the stories that really connect with people. Those real life stories that don't seem super polished, and the small things that we learn, the funny things that happen. That's what people love to see, not just like potential clients, but that's what your current clients love to see. I think that would be my third tip: is stop trying to market all the time to new people.
Yes.
Market to the people that are already in your studio. That means and I am talking about social media here. We can translate this into other things, but if you're stuck on what to post, write that post like you're writing it to a parent that's already in your studio.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think most of us fall into these traps where, and I'll kind of phrase this in two ways. One is we get hyper-focused on student numbers.
Yeah.
And, obviously we've got to think about that stuff. But we also have to think about our existing clients. And because retention can get us less focused on new acquisitions. We also get hyper-focused when it comes to social media about what reactions we get from those posts, right? So, and then we overanalyze, like, okay, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? I can say this with 100% certainty. When I go on social media to write, we do 3 big concerts every year in my school. And it was maybe 5 years ago, the first time I did this. After the concert, it was 2 days long. I was exhausted, but I was just like thinking about all the great moments that happened over those 2 days. And prior, I probably would have never thought to do this because I was like really focused on a polished Facebook post or whatever it is. So I just kind of wrote like, boy, I'm exhausted, but here's what happens.
Right.
This happened, this happened, this happened. And thanks to the venue, thanks to the parents, thanks to the students and staff. And the reactions were huge on that post because it was authentic. And every concert after, I've started doing that. And it's always the biggest, like most responsive Facebook post, right? So it's just me recounting what happened. That's it. And how I'm feeling.
Yeah. People can relate to that, right? They can relate to, doing this big fancy event and now you're exhausted. It's that type of content, that relatable content, that really human content that people want to see.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we can't do that all the time, right?
No, it will be emotionally exhausting.
Yes. But I think we have to be okay with the ebbing and flowing of like, okay, well, if I'm planning out my social media posts for the week, all right, I've got to do one of these, I've got to do one of these.
Right.
Some of them are going to be great. Some of them are not going to be great, but it is what it is. That's part of playing that game. But regardless, try and capture whatever that authenticity is in some small way to implement that into those posts.
That's when you're going to start noticing that marketing feels better.
Yes.
Like it doesn't feel like you're selling all the time. That's what really gets people about marketing because they mix up marketing with sales, and those are two separate things.
Yeah.
And when we start equating that, like then we get into this mindset of, well, if my post doesn't perform well, I'm not going to get sales, or like if if this didn't do well, I'm not going to succeed, and that's not what marketing is really about.
Yeah. That's great advice. Great advice. Marketing is a long game. Well, Sara, I know you've got, do you have any openings for coaching or through your Savvy Music Studio marketing group?
Sure. I have I work one-on-one with a lot of clients, and I have openings now, so people can always reach out. And if you're looking for more of like a DIY route, one of the things that we have at Savvy that we just opened this past year is called the Music Teachers Marketing Library. And it is a library of all kinds of courses about different types of marketing. So it's definitely not social media only focused. We talk about referral marketing. We talk about networking. We talk about SEO and getting your website found. So that's a really great place to start. And we have a fun call every month. We have a Q&A call with that group. And that's always a good time to connect with teachers and, learn what other people are doing.
I love it. I love it. And then what is the website so that they can reach you? And I'll link it in the show notes.
Sure. We're going to keep it super easy. It's savvymusicstudio.com. And that's where you can find me just about anywhere. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all those places. Feel free to reach out if you're ever curious. We have a great newsletter that goes out every Monday with lots of ideas and resources and all that kind of cool stuff, including pictures of my cats, because that is very on brand.
Right. Very authentic. Yep.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Well, this has been fantastic, Sarah. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it felt as we sort of pre-sold in the front end, it felt good. It didn't feel icky. I think it helps people feel a little bit better about the idea of going on to social media or writing marketing emails so that they feel more like themselves as opposed to selling a product, as you mentioned.
That's exactly it. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, John. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah, of course. So we'll wrap this episode up and we'll see you next time. If you have topic suggestions or questions, please contact us at info@rockschoolproprietor.com. We'd love to hear from you and hear suggestions for future shows. We've put together some free resources for teachers and studio owners over at rockschoolproprietor.com and a private Facebook group called The Modern Music School. Please join us over there. On social, I'm at rock.school.proprietor on Instagram and John Kazicki on both LinkedIn and Blue Sky. Your ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify are always appreciated. And if you enjoyed the show and gain insight from our conversation, then we count that as a win. All we ask in return is that you pay it forward and please share the show with someone you think needs to hear it.